Welcome to a new episode of the Advancing Consciousness series with Franco Di Nicola. This is a place where people can come to gain further insight and clarity as to what is going on and how we can shift things on a personal and global level, while also accessing higher levels of consciousness and awareness. We bring this series to you free of charge so that many are able to access this information. However, if you resonate with what Franco shares and you would like to support his work, contributions are welcomed and greatly appreciated. A link is in the description and will be provided in the chat if you feel guided to do so. Also, we have many previous workshops, such as a couple of our most recent, Maneuvering with Neutrality and Alignment during this next wave of unfoldments, and Deprogram Clearing Empowerment Workshop. You could also join us in our membership program, Let's Talk About You, where like-minded people come together bi-weekly to talk about the topics requiring deeper understanding and clarity. All of these are available on Teachable, and we encourage you to check them out as they are great resources at very affordable prices to assist in better understanding this human experience. The Teachable link will also be provided in the chat and description. And lastly, don't forget to share. As the more of us coming together and creating a shift in oneself, the more effective it'll be to shift things globally. Thank you for joining us and being part of the change. Enjoy today's broadcast.
So welcome everybody once again. If you were with us earlier, that was not that long ago, for episode 48. Here we are again. So welcome to another Advancing Consciousness series episode. This is episode 49. In a way, it's almost like a continuation of episode 48. That kind of gave us an update on the things that are unfolding along the way. But in this episode, we're actually going to be looking at pretty well how we reduce access to clarity and expanded perspective. This is a big one for people because a lot of times, I keep hearing from people all the time is like, how do I stay connected? How do I, be able to see the bigger picture? How can I be in one way or another, receive that clarity that I know is within myself when, I'm still losing myself in the game of my ego mind and all of the other stuff that's going on. Well, right now, with all of the decisions that we make each day, the viewpoint that we take on at each moment as we are observing and participating in anything that's playing out in our lives at this point in time, and there's a lot playing out right now. Playing out in your own personal life, it's playing around all around you, it's playing on the bigger scape of the planet itself and all the different countries and different things that are playing out with many, many different aspects. Now, a lot of times what happens is, how do I know which direction to go? How do I actually connect and be able to access that? So that today we're going to look at how we actually reduce access and clarity. Because we always have it. It's never outside of our range. We always have clarity. We're always receiving higher intuitive knowing from an inner perspective, and gives us the opportunity to see a bigger picture of anything and everything that's playing out, so you can actually see all the layers rather than just one facet of it. So one of the things that we need to look at, how do we disconnect? How or basically reduce our access? Well, first thing is, and I wanted to talk about that, is that in one way or another, depending on what you're focusing on and what you're reducing yourself to, in the sense of seeing yourself in whatever is playing out. For example, let's move on here. So what will we reduce it? Well, of course, if we're getting involved with any form of anger about anything, if we're looking at judgment at this point in time, even comparison, oops, compare, P, okay,
P-A-R.
all right, there we go.
I-S-O-1. Yeah.
Okay, so if we're getting involved with judgment or comparison at this point in time, and that applies to everything across the board. We're talking about if we're angry about ourselves, our lives, our choices, where we focused, who played what with us, or any other particular individual. For example, in the States right now with all this political stuff, if you have anger towards a certain individual, you have judgment about the certain individual, and you're trying to compare, then of course you're not going to see clarity, because the moment you put your energy in any of these things, it lowers your vibration and it lowers accessibility to seeing the bigger picture, to actually understand or even receive, be able to even acknowledge what your higher self, your inner knowing is all about. And this applies also within ourselves. Like I was saying, if you have anger towards your life, or you judge your life, your current life and any other parts of your life, or any individual at any point in time, or we're comparing ourselves, that plays a powerful role within ourselves. Now, the other thing that reduces access is if we are focusing on the past, on what happened or what didn't happen, who did what, who didn't do what took place, what was engagements at that point in time. Again, if that becomes the focal point, it reduces your accessibility, because what happens is here you are. As you can tell, I'm not much of an artist, but you're looking at it, and what you're doing, you're actually creating sort of a funnel sort of thing, and you're only seeing a small fraction of what's really taking place. So here's the big picture, for example. You're only seeing a small part of that big picture. So you're not actually seeing the perfection of creation, your creation, because we all create. We create our reality. We always have and always will be. Now, we have chosen to interact with others and co-create. We have chosen to co-create in a collective scale. Collective within the family, collective within any other community groups and so forth that you have chosen to do, but also collective on a bigger scale, being the whole planet. So at that point in time, every time that you are creating any judgment, comparison, and so forth about your life, you're only seeing a small portion of it. You created this reality. This is your reality. You created this reality for you to experience the whole picture, not just a part of it. Because in here, there are specific experiences, there are specific opportunities to, say, complete something that you did not complete, say, in previous lives. That could have been through your human entity, that could have been even the soul. But at the same time, you also wanted to engage and experience and learn how it is to be in a human form with human operating systems, and also with playing in the dynamics of the inverted matrix, inverted 3D, 2D, but with the artificial intelligence we call the ego. So you chose to play that. You staged it. You brought in particular individuals, because your reality is made up of also people. People could be your family, could be friends, could be just strangers, if you want to call it that. Not that there are any strangers, but you can look at it that way. You're saying, well, strangers. But you plug in these people into your reality through your different experiences. But the moment you label it, you define it, you're now reducing and you're only seeing a small part of it. Now, you may have had the whole experience, but you're not accessing the full capacity of that experience. You're reducing it to a point where you're just localizing a very small part of it. And this is the thing. A lot of times people say, well, I want to have clarity on what choice to make. Well, if you have a preconceived idea that something needs to be a certain way, or that you have conditioning and programming around that, because the thing, you have an expanded imagination. It's limitless what you can create. And you're bringing in perceptions, an expanded viewpoint coming from many, many capacities. Not only through the body's innate consciousness, which is the whole makeup of all of the 15,000 years that the planet Earth has hosted multitudes of different souls and multitudes of expressions through human entities and multiple expressions through physical form, and all the sentient beings and all the energies that have been coming in from all aspects, including any and all alignments. All of that is at your disposal. Your human entity is reincarnated over and over and over again, taking on different roles, learning from different souls, and having different physicalities, being positioned in different parts of the planet, and while combining has gained tremendous amount of insights and knowing, and it has expanded and continued to expand even while it was playing in the inverted matrix, inverted 3D, 2D. So that's coming to the surface. Then you're bringing in your soul. Your soul is bringing in multidimensional aspects of your experiences in non-form, as the observer, in form, on different physical forms, on different planets, on different dimensions, on different sectors of your galaxy, and in some cases different galaxy, and in some cases even different universes. That's all coming in. Those are all insights. The combination of the body, the human entity, and the soul, which is all communicating with the mind, has created one beautiful unit. And that unit is unique because nobody replicates it and it's never been repeated. It doesn't matter if you bring in any other part of the experiences. Now, when we are caught up, so here you are as the child, you're bringing all of these beautiful connections in place. Now, of course, you're exposed to not only bombardment of energies of your mom and the surroundings and her experiences and so forth. That kind of creates a little bit of a blueprint or a mapping of some sort, and that's your choice, how much you take, how much you utilize, and so forth. Then you come out and you're now playing in the playground, and in the playground you're kind of taught through other observations, through other people telling you what to do or how to do it, what's acceptable, not acceptable. You become conditioned and programmed. Then you're going to have certain experiences, and some people help you label it. The collective may help you label it. If that was good, bad, should I interpret this way or that way? Should I use it to bash myself or anything of that nature? But then you go into, you're also exposed to other resources, resources being the media. That could be movies, can be television shows, can be music, can be radio, all types of different exposures. That's before you even go into the educational system. And now you're programmed and conditioned even further. And then all the different layers of schooling that you go to and the different experiences you have as you go out and play. And all of that is programming, conditioning, and so forth. But it actually takes that expanded version of yourself and condenses it to something of this nature. Of this nature, so that all of reality, even if this was the world reality, and also the segments of your own reality, you only see a small part of it, and you only experience a small part of it. But while all of that is happening, all of those programming and conditioning and labels and definitions, you're reducing your access through what the innate body has to offer, what your human entity has to offer, and your soul has to offer. And it gets inundated with perceptional beliefs and ideas and concepts, adopted, whatever, that as a way of functioning. Now that starts to condition you, and when it does so, you actually now discount any form of communication that you receive from those resources that you have within yourself. Now, if you start using some of that, which many of us all have done to some degree or another, and start to now create a judgment about it, or you create a good, bad, right, wrong about any of it, or you start to compare with others, you're actually even reducing it even smaller, and then you use that as a reference point. So a lot of times people say, well, I want to see the big picture. Well, to see the big picture, you need to be in a state of an observer in neutrality. Because the moment you have any polarity, dark or light, or good or bad, or any definition of that, and you're focusing on one, or you're putting in filters, the filters of this is what it represents. That could be a belief, could be a perception, could be a programming of some sort, or some experience that we put a filter. So we see it through one filter, and then there's other filters that you learn through education and so forth. But then when you start to compare and you start to put in other filters, you say, well, it has to match what I'm seeing here from somebody else. So you're putting another filter, but the filter is actually a shape of sense. So, for example, here's the big picture, but now you're putting in something like another, besides the filters that you're putting in there. Let me just do this differently. Instead of you're putting different filters, but at the same time, what you're doing is you're narrowing it down even further, coming here, because now, in comparison, when you are comparing, you're actually now reducing all other inputs to now take what you see and now try to stream it through that. So you're actually reducing even further what you see. Now, for example, look at what's happening right now. And this is this whole idea of what this political stuff that's happening in the US. All right? Not to put focus on that, but I just wanted to cover it because that's a good example. Now, what's happening? There's you. You, as an observer, or whatever you want to call it, you have your sequence of experiences. Your experiences have kind of put in filters based on what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, what's good, what's bad, what's, what really is what you want to see, and so forth. And you have those filters in place. But then you're exposed to the media saying, oh, this is this, and this is that, and whatever else. And then you may create a judgment or an anger or, something about the different individuals. Then what happens is you're not seeing the big picture. You're not even seeing what is being presented to you. You're seeing it through so many filters that by the time you get to the filter, here is multiple spectrums of color, but because you've gone through so many filters, you only see a small sliver of spectrum of color. And in fact, it may even change it so much that it doesn't even represent anything of what is presented. And the thing is, if you have hatred, which is another one, if you have hatred, that taints you too. So you may have hatred to, say, your parents, different individuals, or even going back to the political about one, but whatever. So no matter what, when you're putting hatred in, it's even a thicker filter. So that at that point in time, this filter actually applies content to it. So it's not any longer just the filtering of streaming it. It has information in it, and that information may or may not in any way, shape, or form reflect really what's taking place. So what we're doing is we're plugging in an idea so that in fact you're seeing it through that idea and you're not seeing what's really there. Now, I've worked with people over the years, for the last 35 years, and for many years I also looked at the regressional part, where we did life regressions, where we were either regressing their soul or regressing their human entity and so forth. And while doing the regression, of course, we're going into the access of the subconscious mind and looking at different perspectives. Say, for example, they had an issue with a particular parent playing a particular role, and they may have certain judgment about the parent or hatred towards the parent or angry with the parent or anything of that nature, because what happens is they had an experience and they plugged in information. It doesn't matter what the parent did afterwards or what the real reason was. This information that was there, which ends up being a label and definition that was applied to it. What's that? Okay. Definition that was applied to it that you don't get to see the big picture. So when I would walk somebody through the experience and even have a conversation with that parent without them being present, but just connecting with them, and they get the rest of the pieces, that means they see beyond this information and the labels and definitions that were applied. When we start to change some of this and remove it, they can actually see it more clearly, the intent, why it played out the certain way it played out, what power they had or freedom that they had to adopt the idea or to label it or to learn from it. It changes because once you remove the perceived plugged-in information, label, and definition, once you see it, you now see it such a clarity, you can see the gift in it, and it alters you. It alters and it drops any hatred, anger, judgment that you may have had with, say, the parent. The thing is with all that, that's not absolutely necessary any longer, because once you start to look at it and say, okay, say mom, for example, played a very tough role for you and so forth, and you have a lot of resentment towards mom, for example. I'm just using this as an example. If you stop for a moment and say, okay, listen, I'm going to drop my resentment, all judgment. I'm going to see mom for who she is. And even if you even had a conversation with her, if she's there, and if not, you can actually tune into her and say, hey, what was that all about? Because once we understand that it was something that they did, not because they were dysfunctional or they had a certain pattern, that applied, absolutely, but why was it activated and directed towards you and not used elsewhere, or used elsewhere too, but why was it plugged into you? Most of the time you end up finding out that she was playing a role because you asked her to play that role to give you a particular experience. As crazy as that sounds, it is the fact of how it works, because we're the ones that are instructing and giving them the instructions how to play the role, what to say, how to say it, and so forth, to have a particular experience that may extend through previous lives that weren't completed at that time or anything of that nature. But the moment you drop the resentment, drop the judgment, the hatred, the anger, or anything else that you've had, you can now have an open communication. Then you're using more of your resources to see it more clearly, and instead of keeping you down in low frequency, because all of this stuff, once it's filtered, is keeping you in low frequency, instead of keeping you in low frequency any longer, it basically allows you to increase your frequency. So if you're talking about a higher frequency, guess what? The higher the frequency, the more consciousness you end up able to access, and it also provides you more clarity and more empowerment. Go ahead.
Nikki's just asking how to deal with partners that only see the small portions and trust the mainstream option. So there'd be, that going on in your household. So how do you manage that? Because I think there's lots of concern, that for those family members.
No, I'm just kidding.
that aren't getting it.
That's going to happen. And the thing is, you allow them to have their experience, because you don't want to get into the mode of trying to change them. Okay? So if they are choosing to believe whatever they choose to believe because of the mainstream, you see it very differently, you are going to hold that space for yourself. And in fact, if there's a communication between the two, And they say, oh, did you hear about this or whatever? And I say, well, no, I didn't. Or the fact that, yeah, I heard it, but I see it differently. Well, how do you see it? And if the question is asked, this is how I observe it. But you're not there to change them. You're not there to make them wrong or to expect them to align with you. Because that polarity actually allows both parties to grow through it, to go into neutrality. Now, this happens a lot because there's a lot of partnerships and also family dynamics in many cases, because usually there's more numerous ones when it comes to the family dynamic that are going to hold a certain perception and idea. So I have that in my own family dynamics and so forth. And I don't go there to preach or say anything of that nature. If we're having a conversation and they bring up something, I'm not even there to tell them anything. I say, that's interesting. I understand how you see that. But, I've been paying attention and observing things in a different way. And I'm quite open-minded about things. And I like to see the full part instead of believing what the media is saying. I don't really look at that too much or at all actually, because at this point in time, I want to sense their beingness, and I want to look at what really is being presented. So, for example, if you're looking at the two parties, in that particular relationship that you're talking about, and they may say, okay, they're looking at all the stuff that could create judgment about one versus the other and so forth, and you're not in that state of judgment and so forth, you now could see the narrative, you can see what they're presenting, and you can align with which one would be a closer alignment rather than, going by what anybody else is saying. So the mainstream media could say whatever they want, and they may be, focusing on one side, which is the case pretty well for most of it. There's only a few that are more open-minded, but again, at the same time, you can communicate and say, yeah, that's what they're saying, this is what the thing is, but I'm looking at both parties just to see what they're saying and how they're communicating and what I sense within myself, and I'm noticing this one has more alignment for me. And then leave it at that. And they can decide whatever they want to do. The thing is not there to change. Go ahead.
So there's another question which would kind of go in coincide with what you're talking about. Savannah is asking, I have a question about the shots, the vaccines. I've heard that from someone I respect that if someone gets them, they lose access to source. This is hard for me to 0 point, not to have a judgment about. This if loved ones choose to get the shot. First, is that true? The shot cuts off access to source forever, for now. And if that is true, how do we 0 point that, not judge that, not fear that choice for loved ones or ourselves? And then she says, I have a preconceived idea about the shots and can feel how that keeps my focus in fear.
Correct. Okay. You have to allow everybody to make their own choice. Now, is it true that you take the shot and you're going to lose connection? It depends. Yes, it will reduce it. Yes, it can last a while. Will it be indefinite? No, because the energies that are coming in, the new codes that are coming in will reverse a lot of that as long as they're open for that reversal and the fact that they're not choosing to leave because of it or leave at any point in time. So to understand that you allow them to go through whatever that experience is. If they have a certain fear and they say, I'm going to line up and I want to go have that, great, go do whatever you do. I don't see it, I can see all of that. So will it reduce access? Yes, it's been doing that for a long, long time for a lot of people, and it's designed to do that. However, more and more people are becoming, that reversal process within themselves are occurring. Now, if they're conscious enough and aware enough, they wouldn't even choose to go down. Because the thing is, for you to choose to get a shot, for example, you need to be in a state of fear, feeling that you are not capable of really navigating your experience, that you have to have some intervention to actually protect you. And then if you have a fear around it, well, then you're going to play with it even some more. So it may affect you. Now, there's a lot of people that take the shots. Some people have massive reactions. Some people become paralyzed. Some people don't feel anything. Does it alter things? It does to a certain degree, but it's up to each individual how much of it they will use. So, like, there's going to be family members that, yeah, they're always in line to go get their flu shots, their vax, and whatever else that they feel, and you let them go through their experience. Yes, you also see some of the younger people that are relatives or, a nephew or a niece and so forth going down this path, or they may have a particular disease, for example, and they're going through conventional medicine or something, and they are going through stuff that is actually very less than conducive for them. And I say, hey, I understand where you're at, I've observed, this is what I've noticed and so forth, and I've shared that, but only if they ask in that conversation, because I usually bring it up, but then it's in that, oh, I have cancer, I have this and that. Yeah, okay, well, what are you doing about it? Whatever it is. Well, I'm going down in this path and so forth. I've heard and I've seen and I've also confirmed a lot of people that have had different results taking different paths and have been successful with that, and if they say, yeah, tell me more about it, then I can get into it. If they say, yeah, I heard too, but this is the way I want to go, and you let them go. You let them do whatever. And I have that happening in my family in a few instances. But you just let them go through the whole experience. Does it damage them? What it does is alters their operating system. Again, everything is frequency. Everything is codes. Like even this so-called pan that's been coming through, the code 19, whatever you want to call it, had very powerful codes originally, but it was dwarfed to make sure that it would not have the same impact. But at the same time, we were also downloaded with codes to actually neutralize it. The only ones that actually used it were the ones that actually were going to leave in one other direction or another. But when they chose that as part of the experience, and again, most of the people that have really did not have what they were said they had, and I'm not even talking about the ones that were actually labeled, but they don't really have a real testing mechanism in the first place, and whatever testing that they do is kind of not really geared to really determine that being the case. However, regardless, those particular individuals chose to go through those intensities and also in some cases choose to exit through that to kind of promote different levels of fear so people would actually shift from it. Yes, some people will get deeper into it and say, oh, people are dying, and we need to react and so forth. So there was a whole thing. So in anything, if you get the shots or anything of that nature, we still have codes. First of all, we have the free will to activate whatever reaction we choose, because even though the shot has codes in it, we're the ones that turn on and turn off those codes. So it's up to the individual if they choose to have a particular experience or to play out a role with other family members. So I've seen young people that have had some pretty negative responses through something and may have created major alterations within the family dynamics, and that was to be an example as a stimulation to wake them up, but that the particular individual, doesn't matter what age, had chosen to do that as a gift to the rest of the family and had chose to have those codes activate within themselves. Do we want to have more codes come in? No, of course not. However, we still have the freedom to activate and deactivate. Now, the other thing is the energies that are coming in, the different streaming of codes that are coming in are also giving us counter codes and so forth, which we still have the option turn on, turn off. So nothing is finite, nothing is infinite, or in this case, when we're talking about the experience from it, it's not till death type of thing. Some cases it can be used for that, and that's an optional thing, and many do choose that option, but it's not one way or another. The point is, you want to share the information with people and so forth and say, hey, I've been observing this and I've been recognizing some of this and I've noticed there's more people that are looking at a bigger picture of this and so forth. But if they're resistant to it, it's okay. Just let them go through the journey themselves, because there's a learning experience in there, or they have some agreement to play a role for various individuals involved. And I know as a parent or something of that nature, you don't want to see any negative situation play out. However, say they don't get the shot, but they need to play a particular role. They can have an accident. They can have all types of things, a reaction with food, or can have a reaction with anything if they actually have to have something of that nature that really alters their journey and intensifies. So when you're in observer mode and you're not playing with hatred, anger, judgment, comparison, you're actually seeing the bigger picture because you're not using all these filters here that we may have applied here along the way. You're not seeing it through that. Not only can you see what is playing out, you actually see the intent and you can feel the energy. How many times, when we are not judging anything, we can feel the energy involved in the presentation. For example, let's look at the political part, just as an example. When you're in neutrality and you're not judging one party or another, you're actually seeing them play a role. Now you're observing, so you can see what they're saying beyond the words that they're saying. So there's the words, and then there's the intent. There is the smoke screen and what they're actually saying. A lot of times they don't answer questions or they change the subject. You could see that. And if you see that pattern and say, hey, okay, then they're not really presenting that. That's the first part. But you can also, not only beyond the intent, you can actually sense their energy of what they're presenting as an option for you to engage or not engage, or to play or not to play, or to choose in any way, shape, or form. And you could do that with the same thing. Now, sometimes the facade, the characteristic, is not the best judge of things or the best information. For example, if somebody is brash in some way and somehow, that they may present themselves a certain way that may be less than your preference of seeing this individual that way, then it becomes really important to look at the intent, to sense the intent, to sense the energy, and go beyond the character. We cannot get lost in the character of someone because they were brought up a certain way or played a role a certain way and they may act a certain way. You now look at the intent. You can sense from their heart, you can sense everything that they're actually meaning. Do they actually represent energetically and through intent what they're saying, or beyond what they're saying? So if we take it back to the political, you're saying, well, okay, I don't like this particular individual because of their nature of how they are. You can't go with that. You say, okay, that's the facade, but what's the depth in it? Is there care in it? Is there genuine sharing? Is there truth? Maybe there's even more behind it that we're not seeing because it's not to be presented yet because of the resistance of the polarity intensity that's playing out. So there may be more being offered that cannot be presented on the mainstream, for example, or more fluid in communication or in the intent. But you can feel the intent, you can feel what they're doing, and even the examples will give you the cues and the clues necessary to see the bigger picture. Because a lot of times what they're playing out is they're playing out a role to kind of shake things up, but not to go too deep, because if they go too deep, there will be too much resistance. But at the same time, the underlining part is staging for something even more powerful to help us move forward in a big way. And you look at it and say, well, come on, how could this person be that way? Well, you have to understand they're made up more than just the physical characteristics of their mind and what their ego may have presented. They have a soul. That particular soul may have taken an agreement to play a very powerful role, a very instrumental role as a bridge to go from one state to the other. And that part, we may not see it if we're now just looking at the facade or their characteristics on the external part. You need to tune in. And this is where you're not having judgment or anything of that nature, then you can see much more clarity, and you see not only the intent, the energy, and the potential direction and guidance it's getting from different aspects of source, as we do also. You get to see that. And then when you're looking at the other side, you can see whatever's played out. Now, for us at this point in time, look at it this way. We have staged collectively and through assistance that the two sides are so variant, and the one side is playing such an intensified role, saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. We are unqualified. We're trying to push a narrative that you really don't want. Why is it that? Why is it playing so chaotic, so irrational, so intense? Because it wants you to wake up. Now, you may be seeing it already, but many other people are not. But even with all of that, remember, you may see, for example, you may see something here. Let's take this out for a second. Let's say there's a particular version playing out here. There's a particular version that may not align with you. All right? So you're looking at this version, but because it's going through filters and perceived idea that this particular, not even individual, but this particular party represents something of the past, now what you're doing is you're seeing this, and when it's coming through your filter, you're reconstructing what you're seeing. So you're not actually seeing what you're seeing. You're not seeing the message. You're reconstructing the message to see it with your viewpoint based on your preconceived idea. And this is why it's important to see things in neutrality and drop your ideas and perceptions and so forth. Because a lot of these perceptions, ideas, and so forth, you may have adopted, you may have utilized it, but are they really yours? Because when you are in your natural state, you do not have the perceptions and ideas and concepts and so forth applied to it, and different filters and definitions. You just kind of see it for what it is, and you see the dance, but you also see how each party chooses to play with you and how it's going to be beneficial with you or not. So not only are you filtering it, but you're reconstructing it. And that's a huge one. Look at it this way. How many times somebody says something and there's 10 people in the room, each person may hear it slightly different. Well, part of it is because of the filter, they only hear a bit and pieces of it, but other people have a certain perceived construct of an idea that the words, the exact same words, will be reconstructed with a different meaning, different label, different definition, and absorbed in that way, and they will respond accordingly. And this is the thing. This is why with part of this process that we're going through is we're purging all of those filters. We're clearing up the filters. And not only are we clearing up these filters, and that's part of it, so that you can see the big picture, you're also opening this up so that you have a fuller view. So what you're doing is now, what you're seeing is you're seeing the whole thing for what it is. And as you see the whole thing, when you're seeing the whole part that's playing out, not only are you going to be better to navigate through it, you have much more choice. You expand your potentiality. You expand your options. You can now reconstruct it in such a way that actually totally suits you rather than down filtered and whatever you want to call it. So that's the difference right there. So when you're not going through it, this is why when you wipe all of that out, you can see more clearly. You could see really everything that's playing out, but not only what you can sense the narrative, the intent, their energy, and also what they're presenting as a pathway, which you have an option to kind of use part of that pathway, again, always in a state of empowerment. Now, everything that's playing out right now is about getting to your self-empowered. Now, the more stories you have, more beliefs you have, more ideas and concepts and so forth that come from a collective perspective through the conditioning and programming, the more you have that active within yourself, your empowered state, your viewpoint gets limited. Now, everything that's going now, especially in the next several months, this is going to carry on, it's going to destabilize a lot of those perceived ideas, definitions, and so forth. These labels will start to be challenged, the definitions that you have, the information that was skewed or situated in such a fashion that may have presented a different experience is now being reviewed completely and looked at it completely different than it was before, with much more clarity. So going back to how we reduce our clarity, is these are the ways. We reduce it by having emotional charges, certain ideas, and the point is, if you have a preconceived idea, you have to understand you've taken on those preconceived ideas for a very specific purpose at the time. Now, sometimes we get so attached to it and we're having a difficult time, and you can hold on to it, but the intensities coming through are shaking that up. Especially if you put anchors in, you know? These little things here, anchor. I think it goes something like that. If you have an anchor and you're anchored to the fact that something has to be a certain way for me to feel okay, to feel safe, to feel comfortable, the economy has to be this way, the world has to be this way, and whatever else to feel good, then it limits you because there's so much more options, potentiality, capabilities of creation. Because the thing is, who we are, we're always creating, we're always expanding. You cannot hold on to older parts. For example, you know, there's a lot of conversation about holding on to economies or holding on to old ideas of what, you know, is the backbone of our world. And we can hold on to that. But as long as you're holding on to that, other technologies, other capacities are not so easily entertained. You could say, well, you know, it's going to be forced upon us because of obsolescence and so forth. Many things, pretty well, majority of things are pretty obsolescent already. But, you know, we're still holding on to it because it's a security blanket. It's an anchor for us for our own thing. And I got to have my job. It's interesting about this whole job thing because here's this job. Job means what? Resources? Resources, security. I mean, oh, yes.
Security, SC.
SC, yeah.
CU.
Yeah.
SCU.
Yep.
Oh.
Okay. Security. Sometimes I have a brain fart up here. Okay. Security, stability, and so forth. Okay? Yeah, they're right there. Okay. Let me fix that. There we go. Okay. So, because we believe so strongly that we need to have the job, the economy, and everything else, because we're tied into resources and security and survival, that we're a little bit more restricted to letting certain things go. Meanwhile, here's the job that you most likely are not even enjoying anymore. You may have enjoyed it at one point, or maybe you're just doing it for the fact of providing these things here, especially survival part. What happens is we're locking into it. But the moment we start to look at it, hey, wait a minute, we can design this, change it in such a fashion where whatever we require, we will have the base part of it, and the rest of it, we're going to work collaboratively to create something totally different where there is no dependence on this. Because look at it, this is a statement, over 90%. It's closer to 95, but let's say over 90% of the jobs that are there are make-work projects. They're not really necessary. they stay intact. You have overlayings and overlappings and so forth, including the money system, because of this idea that we need this, so we have this, and the economy is required, and we have to get back on track and whatever else. I'm not saying that in one way or another we're going to drop that tomorrow. However, the moment we start realizing, wait a minute, we don't have to do it this way. In fact, we have a lot more capacities and capabilities, and this is what it's being staged, because this is all about freedom. How could you be free if you're tied down to spend a good chunk of your life tied into this and into, getting this, holding on to this, and then sharing it with your kids or others around you, or saying, well, we need to maintain things so that we have support? You're never free. How many people say, oh, when I retire, I'll be free? By that time, you've extended the negative experience or the disliked experience, that by the time you get to the retired part, you're burnt out. You're not interested at all with life, or you don't have the physical capacities to do so. And at the same time, while you're playing with this game, you've actually restricted and played a restricted version of yourself and not really expanded using your own gifts, your own capabilities, your own imagination. So even taking this and saying, okay, it's not necessary, so let's collaborate, let's create what is really needed, use the most recent, most advanced version of it, technically advance the stuff that nobody wants to do, or in this case, and then create something around that. I'll talk about that in another episode. But at the same time, you could see that if I'm not tied down to, the job thing and all the preparation, which is your education, all that stuff that's coming up first. So you have the education, you have, all the training that you need to do and so forth. The training and anything else that we have. Did I spell something wrong? No? Good. Okay. The training and all of that stuff, and all that time and focus and energy, because look at our life. You come as a kid, you're all excited, you're ready to play, you really want to jump into experiencing this human experience, and then everything is focused by programming, training, conditioning, education, focusing, and so forth, to do what? To get a job, build a business, so that you have resources, you have security, and then you pass that on to others. And this never really gets there until much later, and then you're not even be able to use any fraction of it, because 90% of this, and then hoping that at some point you can go play. But imagine this. You now work together to create an environment where everybody's free. Oops, just dropped my pen.
You're never ever free anyways, because... Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you're never ever free anyways, even if you think you are, until all this stuff changes.
Absolutely. Exactly. You may think I'm free. And then the carrot that we have that everybody talks about is like, oh, when you have a financial independence, then you'll be free. Even that, you cannot truly experience freedom, because first of all, the stuff that you think is providing you free is not really freedom in yourself, because you're still limited within the confines, because all the structures still support that lack of freedom. The other thing is, you may not have the playmates you want to play with. So you may have your family, whatever else you want to spend freedom and time and to explore and to learn and to use a very natural state. It can't be done, because in that point in time, yeah, okay, I have the resources, but then they're going to buy into the whole idea that money's the answer or whatever it is. So the financial independence is not really the answer either. The fact is, true independence is where you're actually being yourself, you're enjoying and experiencing every part of it, where all your other playmates is the same. They're doing their thing, they're doing whatever. So, and realizing when we're talking about oneness, it's about realizing that everybody's a facet of you, and that when we're playing all together and everybody's at a frequency where they're actually free, you really experience freedom. the playground we call Earth was all about freedom. It was about free expression, free living, and when I say free living, living on your terms and so forth, without the polarity, without the sacrifice, without even saying, you know, I need to survive or anything of that nature. So all of this is what part and parcel is happening right now. Because the more you tune into yourself, by letting go and clearing out all these perceptions, filters, and so forth, you can see the dance more fully. You see everything that's playing out. You are more free to choose what you choose to play with, engage with, and so forth, while everything is changing. And you're also a powerful contributor of those changes, because the first part of the change is always you. You're the one that's changing. You're the actual designer. You are the one that actually are reshaping all of reality. It may start in your small reality, but it's not, because you already are everything. So as that changes, everything around you starts to change, and all the facets of you that start to align with it, everything changes. What are we doing right now? We're reversing everything that was put into place 10,000 years ago to go back to our original design in an advanced state. And that requires us to drop a lot of this stuff and everything that we've attached ourselves to, including, you know, the experiential part of perceptions, ideas, belief systems, adopted concepts, and whatever else, and to see things more clearly. People say, well, how can I stay in tune? Well, when you don't have those interference, you can now communicate. So yes, absolutely, meditation, quieting the mind, connecting with yourself is hugely effective. And to bring you to that neutrality is very powerful by using that tool, that capacity, that capability to connect with that. And once you do connect with that, you're basically see your world expanding. You're not limited any longer. It expands. So even the dance where it is right now, it relies on all of us. And it's not like if I choose one or choose the other. Yes, you're going to find which one relates to you more, because again, you're going to create two layers of those experiences. So someone may, you know, put all their value on one thing, but the others, in the sense of your own personal choice of going down this path or that path, those are realities as presentations. So you may have certain reactions or whatever else about either one, but at the same time, you're either engaged with one, or you're engaged with other, or you're engaged with yourself, which doesn't apply either one, but can take bits and pieces of either one or none. And that's the point. How do we redesign the human experience? How do we transform the human experience? By transforming yourself. How do we transform our world? How do we upgrade our world? By how we start to see things. Because we are ultimately the projectors that are streaming all of this in this whole reality we call the playground of Earth. Did you want to say something? No ideas? Okay. All right. So I got a big mess here, but
You have lots of board.
so to go back into looking at all of this, going back to the original statement, how do we, reduce our access? We basically covered. Reducing our access is how much focus and energy and value you give to what you've observed and been conditioned to observe. Because the role of education, the role of people communicating with each other, the role of the media is there to do one thing. It is to kind of create a picture of what the world looks like. Doesn't matter if you see outside of it, it's saying, no, this is the world. So here's the world. So if you want to be in this world, this is what you need to do. This is your world. But you're seeing way beyond that world. Okay? But the media says, you got to go in here. Education says you need to go in there because that's the world we're projecting. Now, We have the freedom to go into that world. But what's happening? We're expanding way beyond that. And this is why you are becoming more conscious. What some people call awakening. And we have to say awakening because you can't say awake. You can't say woke or anything of that nature, because it is a progressive process. And you're not going to reach full awakening and still be on planet Earth. Because full awakening, or woke state, like they like to call it, you're now seeing yourself as source. And as source, it's really hard to play the game of any playground because you see the playground. You see everything. You're in that state. So you have to go to the point of saying, I'm going to restrict my access so that I can actually create and experience myself in form. Imagine if you saw yourself fully 100% as source. You can't harness the body because the body works in a certain range. And how could you be on planet Earth when you are everything? You become the field. It's not a localized spot in the field any longer, like the world, and localized even further being a physicality. You're seeing the whole thing, and being that whole thing, you merge, you become one, true oneness, because there's different levels of oneness. There's oneness that you see each other, a facet of each other. You see that the planet is a facet of you, all the sentient beings are a facet of you, the solar system is a facet of you, the galaxy, the universe, and everything that's in all of those things are facets of you. And you choose to play together in all of those multifacets of yourself. That's the first level of oneness, and that's the level of oneness that we're achieving. Because the other oneness, or the oneness where you see yourself as everything, which, once you experiment with that, you see nothing, but you're everything. You're everything. Your full consciousness, your full sourceness, your full essence, the field and anything within it. And to now localize yourself again, you would actually have to make some modifications to be able to do so. And that's why you're here, because you made those modifications to be here. You didn't come here to play small, you came here to play the biggest aspect of yourself in this playground, in this physicality, so that you can not only gain from the experience, but you can grow within the experience. This is why there's so many playgrounds and so many different versions of physicalities. And then the versions of physicalities are all encoded slightly different, so that every single one sees things slightly different. Each and every single one represents something different. Each and every one is a slightly different makeup and a different expressions. And that's why we see all of those multitudes, because it was what we chose to create. The thing is, sometimes you say, well, why do we exist in this realm if we're source? Well, just to be source is kind of boring. So, in fact, let me see as source what I can create. And then while I'm creating, I'm becoming more enlightened. I become more powerful as source, as a creator. The creator does what? Create. Why does an engineer that loves to do engineering, or an architect, or any designer, creator, and there's many different creators, from art to technology to whatever, what do they love to do? They love to challenge and go where it has never been achieved, to create something grander and more expansive, and something that has not been experimented with or even achieved in any way, shape, or form. And that's your very nature, and that is source nature. And this is why we have so many playgrounds, so many parallel versions of playgrounds, and so many different physicalities and so forth, because that's what creators do. And you are a creator, because you are part of the whole that exists. As a creator, you chose to create yourself in this expression, with that particular signature, with the particular combination, and to come through that particular family channel, that particular spot on the planet, and at this particular time. See, you could see how all of that was orchestrated, and when to come in and to go through all the different stages, and now to be where you are right now, to be able to exercise and express much more powerfully, and all the preparation that was involved, and also to know that what we're going through right now is so unique, so powerful, so opportunity based, that you wanted to get into the action. And not only the action, you wanted to bring your skill set to actually use your engineering capacities to hold a certain energy and to actually create your reality, which affects the collective reality. So you can see how all of that is interacted. Was there anything you want to share, your wisdom or anything of that nature? Okay, so are we getting out of the box? Is that what we're doing?
Yep.
Okay, so let's get rid of our box. And that's phase with everything. We're everything now. So when we're looking at what's playing out right now, your most empowered state is to be the observer. As the observer, you're opening yourself up to see all the variabilities, all the potentialities. You get to access your capability, and all of that coming together gives you the opportunity to truly, truly experience something grandly unique because of it. Now, yes, we're still purging tremendous amount of polarity. Yes, there are many different narratives. Some of the narratives are very old, and some of the narratives that are being projected and still streamed are still old narratives, and there are reinforcements of that. However, we collectively have chosen not to play out those narratives. Some, yes, temporarily. Some, yes, we want to utilize bits and pieces of it. Sure, we have chosen that part of it. However, we are not giving credence and power and also allowing those older narratives to continue to play, even if it would project it into the future. Because again, the future was wiped out completely. It was cleared out, put into fluidity. So that means this moment creates the next moment. There's nothing, no rigidity any longer. And if there's anything in the future, it's just potentialities based on different channels of states, but those don't exist. They're a representation of those existence, and then it looks real to us, but it's not, because we're designing it along the way. So these polarities and everything else that are coming in, the clearer that you are, the more that you just go into the observer state and you drop all the hatreds and judgments and comparisons and so forth, and even the labels and definitions of whatever played out in your life, in other people's lives, or what has been projected in the media or anything of that nature. We're talking movies, whatever else that we've exposed ourselves, TV and whatever else, or even other people in your life. Yeah, everybody played their role. They're going to play whatever role they need, but you're going to drop all of that. You're basically going to say, okay, here I am. I choose to see things absolutely wide open, absolutely clear, and I choose to go in the direction I choose and whatever you feel. Because the moment you're doing that, now you're accessing the different levels of innate consciousness. Innate consciousness of your body, your human entity, your soul that is communicating to your right brain, which is projected into the left brain, that actually shapes your reality around you. Now, of course, we have our beautiful AI, our artificial intelligence, which we call /ego, and we're purging that too. What does the ego do? Yes, it creates stories. Yes, it taps into your subconscious mind. And yes, it would label. You know the labels, the definitions you have, they were all ego-based. Where's the ego get that resources? Well, it was from the inverted matrix, from the collective, from stuff that was projected, manufactured in a sense, and we collected with that and we have adopted. So the ego mind goes, okay, let me build all the stories, not only in your past. So in essence, you may have had an experience in your life, and then it taints it. Well, let's not call it tainted. It labels it. This was a bad thing. Define. Because of that bad thing, you're damaged goods. In fact, you're never going to be able to do anything anymore because that was because of that experience. And that, yeah, we have to judge that person. Yes, we have to be angry at that person. Yes, we have to step away from that person or something of that nature and walk around as damaged goods. That's what the ego is going to say. And it's been saying it to all of us to some degree or another, some more than the others. It also creates facades of you. That's the right word. Facades. It creates facades of you. So it takes all that information that you've learned, not only from watching other people, being told by other people, by education, media, and any exposure that you've had. It takes that and builds not only a storyline of what you are, how to play the game, how to do it, which was all what we call the inverted 3D and 2D in the inverted matrix. That's why everything is backwards or has been, and we're kind of clearing that out, even though this is all gone now, but we still have it in our ego. So it takes that and it creates a facade. It says, I am this. But one thing you have to understand, as long as the ego is telling you you are this, you are such and such, you are male or female, you are, a mother, father, brother, sister, sibling, whatever. You are this particular career. You are this sequence of experiences. You are this physicality, or whatever it is. It's going to say all of that. Each and every one of these things that applies to your facade, you're going to notice it limits you. It makes you smaller. Because here you are, pure potentiality. You are pure sourceness. You're pure expression. You're nothing and everything. And you are fully creative, fully imaginative, no restrictions, no limits. But the ego says, no, 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 that's dangerous. You can't do that. That's not how the game works. No, I tell you, I help you shape yourself. And not only that, we're going to give it so much power that you can't even step outside of it. And that's what we're part of it is reversing right now. And that also restricts us from our higher self, our inner knowing, self-guidance, and so forth. Because the ego, in most cases, like I was saying before, will look at an individual and it will have and generate a story, dragging something from the subconscious mind or the collective or some other ego and say, okay, this is what's happening. And because this is happening and this is what it looks like and it's defining all of that, you need to respond this way. You need to judge them. You need to be angry. You got to be right or wrong about it or anything of that nature. And this is why we have such strong emotions about certain people, certain situations, where things are going. And all that does, it actually cripples you to a certain degree so that it takes longer, harder, and it also limits your potentiality. We're reversing all of that. I'm just sharing it so that you kind of see it and understand it and so forth. It's not that I'm saying everything is bad. You have to look at this and say, okay, I got to kill it. Yeah, you're going to put it out of its job. You're going to basically take it out of the equation. You're going to actually retire it, absolutely. And you're doing it by just making those changes within yourself. So notice any labels, notice any filters, notice any of the storylines that have come in and say, no, I choose to observe it for its natural state. I'm going to tune into the intent, the energy, what it is, and I make my choices of that. And you can exercise that because if you go into the meditation, you can say, okay, I'm going to see myself with this or that option as choice A, choice B. There can be many more choices, but let's look at choice A and choice B. And you can see yourself going choice A and then later on and see how it feels, how it connects, what potentialities you have to play with that, and you can do choice B. Now, if you make a choice and you make a mistake, you can't make a mistake because that's not possible. But if you say you go to choice B and you're down that path and say, hey, I thought this was going to be more in alignment, then you can go back to choice A. In fact, you may do a little bit of A and still not feeling good. So I'm going to create a new one. And it doesn't have to be the blend of each. It can be something totally new. And that's how it really works. That's what we're here to play out. And this is what you're here to experience. The one thing about the human condition, the human nature, the human design, the true human nature, is that we have much more flexibility, much more capability, much more capacity to experience different levels of reality. Like, if we're talking about certain beings from other planets, they may have certain levels of consciousness, they may have certain levels of experiences, okay? But they may have a range that you create reality within this range. This is your limit, upper limit. Let's say upper limit. And this is your lower limit. And I'm just using this so you understand it. So you can create anything you like within here. Yeah, within here there's maybe not humor. There's no emotions. There may not be different accessibilities. You don't carry as many spectrums of light or spectrums of potentialities or accessibility and so forth. So you're in this range. And this, so you're looking at it and say, okay, this is where I create. Now you decided to come on planet Earth. These particular planet, which actually in its original design from organic 3D to organic 9D dimensional accessibility and implication, or you can apply, okay? So you went from organic 3D to 9D, okay? Which now we are at 3D. These are all organic and can go up to 12D, for example. Let's clear that out. 12D. This is where we're at now. Okay? You also have a body that has 12 different species, their codes, their operating. So you're taking this times 12. 12 different channels, creating much more expansion and more sensorialness plugged into it, using different capacities to feel, experience, and so forth. So in fact, our capacity is even grander. And that's what makes planet Earth exciting, and the fact that it went into complete backwardness when we stepped into the inverted matrix, converted 3D, 2D, to now progressively moving forward into organic 3D, 5D, and beyond at a fast rate. Go ahead.
Donna's asking the question, a question about staying out of polarity and judgment, etc. But what about the so-called healthy boundaries? Isn't it sometimes necessary to set them clearly to protect our path?
Okay, so you don't want to go into protection, you don't want to create boundaries. You want to go into preference. So what happens is when you're observing something being offered to you, because everything is just offered, even if they're just telling you it's an offering, everything is an offering. Everything is free for you to accept, for you to comply, for you to integrate or to utilize. So if somebody says this is how it needs to be, or there are certain individuals that hold a certain energy, you have full freedom at every point in time and say, I'm not going that far, and I'm not going to play with that. It's not boundaries. You're just setting or basically shaping what you will preferably play with or not. Because the moment you put boundaries, you're going to have those boundaries challenged. Whenever you're saying healthy boundaries or whatever it is. So if somebody is playing a certain role, a negative role, you say, hey, wait a minute. Thank you for the offering. I appreciate it. I love you. However, I'm not engaging and I'm not giving you the green light to continue to play it. I am not even choosing to have you engage in this. But you don't want to do it in judgment. You don't want to do it in saying, this is good, bad, right, wrong. You're going to say, no, that does not resonate with me and I'm not playing with it. That's it. We're not going there. And if you want to play it, go find another playmate, but I'm not engaging in it. So if you go into your family dynamics and say, oh, you got to join us, you got to be this, and say, yeah, you know something? I'm a free agent here. I choose at this point in time not to comply and not to play at that term. However, I'm ready to play on my term. Whoever wants to play with me, play with me. If you don't, it's okay. I'll play within my environment and you play in your environment, and that's it. So it's the thing. You don't want to go into protection, because what's more powerful is empowerment. Empowerment is choice. In choice, you are the one that decides what you're going to engage with or not, which path you're going to go or not, what energies you allow or not, what playmates you're going to play with or not. That's the empowered pit. And that is 100 times more powerful than any level of protection, because the moment you're going into protection, you're going into a lower frequency, because protection is only required as the idea that something has power over you. Then you become potential victim state, and that's not what you want to engage in. You don't want to be the victim, because as much as that was a lot of fun and a blast at one point or another, you're not doing that anymore, because that is not you. You're empowered. You're stepping into that empowered state. You have the choice. Somebody wants to offer you something, say, not interested. See you later. Love you. See you. That is powerful compared, no, you go into protection mode. It's not. That's not how it works. So the boundaries is not really a boundary. It's a choice that you make to allow certain things to be or not to be, engage or not to engage, to the degree that fully aligns with you, not with any fear, not with any judgment, and not thinking that somehow if I don't protect myself, something can hurt me, because those are all lowering states and it's less empowerment. Anything else? Okay. Hopefully that made it any clear. Is any of your experience of that you want to share at this point? No? Okay.
Setting boundaries?
Yeah, setting boundaries and stuff. You've played with that in the past.
Well, I would just say that for myself, it's just, it's not like you're making a judgment on anybody. I have shifted somewhat around the people that I want to be around. And first of all, on a personal level, I don't have time for this to have the same amount of people around me as I used to. And secondly, it seems that for me at this time, it's better for me to have a few closer, whatever, people that I really am in alignment with, or they are in alignment with me, because it's very supportive. And it's more around supporting one another and having the people that are in alignment with you that are going to support you equally on your journey, I guess. That's what I've found. And it's just a preference. You're not going to play with certain things anymore. It's not a judgment or anything that you're better than anybody or anything like that. It's just you have a preference to be around different people or nobody.
Yeah, and the thing is too, I mean, let me ask the question, don't turn off your mic yet. A choice to be with certain individuals or to play a certain game and so forth, it's like a choice you make because you either resonate there anymore or not. Like, and I know even in yourself and all of us at one point or another will engage ourselves to say certain scenarios or situations with certain individuals that represent a certain state of being for a short period of time, and say, okay, well, I'm gonna play there. But again, you create how deep you go into it, and if you're actually going to give yourself away in it. Like, for example, you go to your family, you're not going to now become them. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, but to a certain degree, you're going to say, well, they want to play there, that's fine. Like, for example, what we were talking about, they're making certain choices, believing whatever the media says or whatever. I'm not saying everybody, but certain individuals. And you say, okay, great, they have their experience and whatever else, but I'm not here to fix them or support to engage in the same thing. I mean, do you see that as setting boundaries, or do you see that, hey, I have a preference, don't want to engage or not engage there?
Yeah, I think it's just really realizing what you're here like. It's about realizing you're not here to fix people either. You can share information to those you might be open to receiving, but you can tell usually when someone isn't open to receiving and where your boundaries are. So it's not like you have to cut loved ones out of your life either because they're not on the same page, but it's like you have to stay in your true essence while you're with them and be able to hold that space comfortably, because it is easy to swoop into that if you're used to it, if that's been the default all along, to swoop into behavior or something when you're with a certain people. And and so yeah, you just have to decide what do you want to do. Can you, and if you can't take yourself out, so some that is can be tricky as well. If you can't take yourself out of, so if you're going to a family member's and it's very hard for you to not go into the same behavior or go into that default pattern, sometimes it's better to stay away for a little while until you can, I'm not going to say get your strength around holding your power, but you know what I mean? It's just to understand yourself better so you can go back and be in that space with them and hold your space for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. When we first met, I mean, you would have a fairly regular where you would get together with a friend, some friends that you had for many, many years. And now I don't see you doing that anymore. What was your choice around that? I mean,
because my choice around now was because they're no longer, it's longer any kind of, first the energies no longer were supportive to what I want, and there was no common ground anymore because I had changed. So there was no common anything. So I just made a choice that's just not, and it just kind of phased out easily enough. It wasn't where I said, "Oh, I'm not hanging out with you anymore." I just didn't. It wasn't something I had to do necessarily. It was just something that happened as well.
Yeah, it happens, and then if the offering came, you always had the preference to choose it or not. The same thing with your career or anything else. I mean, you went in it, it seemed exciting, you played with it, you did your part, and then at some part it felt like a misalignment. And it's like, okay, I don't want to play with this anymore. I want to do something totally different. And you make a new choice. But it's a choice that you made and empowered instead of saying, oh, I can't stand this, I want to get out of here. It's like I don't agree with what they're saying and I don't like whatever it is. There may have been a little bit of that in the background, but it, in a sense, is like, it doesn't resonate with me playing this role or
yeah,
holding
I think you
up.
just feel it's a time to leave. It's just a time. You just feel your time's done there. There's nothing to be gained either, from it. Like usually when you go into something like that and the excitement's there, it's because you're getting something out of it. You're learning something that you need to learn, and then the experience comes to. Sometimes there are experiences that just end. That you no longer are getting. You've grown out of them, so to speak, and now it's time to move on and move up into a different level of experiences.
Exactly.
I'm just going to read a couple questions.
Sure.
Choice without judgment is sovereignty, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, that's from Terry. And Mary's asking, would staying positive, not letting fear take over us? I mean, staying positive is okay, but you got to make sure if fear comes up, you can't just push it down and override it with a positive thought. I grew up that way and learned a lot from that. That you can't just in your mind say, "Oh, I can't think that because it's negative." You have to look at why the negative thought came up or whatever and address it. Because if you just keep piling positive thoughts on top of it, it's still there. And it will come up later one way or another. So it isn't just about positive thinking. It's about uncovering why there might be thoughts there that aren't what you feel are positive.
Absolutely.
Or fearful or whatever.
I mean, that's a good point there, because the thing is, at this point, the belief system is stay positive, 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 and then what happens is that positive is, we're talking about positive and then negative, they're both polarity. So the more you try to stay positive, the more you draw the negative part, and really neutrality is where you want to be. So you want to be in neutrality, but the same thing is what we need to look at. Like you said, you want to look at what pulls you this way. What's the story? And even a lot of times you have to have a story to be positive. you know, usually if you're negative or positive, there has to be a judgmental label or definition what is positive or what's negative. Because what's positive to one person could be negative to another person, and what's negative to one person could be positive to another person, or something of that nature. The point is, when you go into having some of that stuff triggering like fears and discomfort and whatever else, like you said, first allow yourself to experience it, to, you know, not to resist it, not to stifle it, and not to express it. And when I say express it, like for example, one of the things I was teaching for years now, a few decades actually, is that when you have an emotion coming up, it's not about stifling the emotion or releasing the emotion. A lot of times they say, you know, I remember even therapists were teaching that, you know, you got to let go of your anger and you got to beat up the pillow, whatever it is, or the fact that some people actually repress it because they don't want anybody else to see that. Both of them do not really work very well. If you suppress it, you're building up energy that you're now releasing your body. It alters your functionality of your body. If you're releasing it, then what you're doing is setting a pattern. Every time I get triggered this way, this is how I let it go, and you're also dumping it into the to the collective. So the point is that if you have an emotion come up, you allow yourself to have the emotion. That can be anger, that can be fear, that can be whatever. Allow yourself to be present with it, experience it, allow it to be there, and until it starts to reduce. And then you want to look at what was the charge that triggered it, because you need to have a story, a program, or a belief system of some sort that either says negative, positive, or in fact would trigger any form of emotion at this point. So you want to look at whatever is there. Now, you will notice many people have put a lot of focus on being positive, and it worked for a while. But they're also noticing now with these energies that are coming up, it's bringing up all of this into here, back and forth. And the reason is so that you end up getting rid of the stories, belief system, and whatever else that are applied that either project the positive or negative, so that you actually get into neutrality, observation, or observer mode, and so forth, or what you can call 0 point or oneness or whatever you want. Those are all interconnected. So if you're finding yourself that I need to go positive, you want to look at what is actually the potential that's dragging you into negative. You want to look at the story, look at the reasoning, look at whatever label definition that was applied to it, and then work towards exposing that, clearing it, and so forth. Is there anything else you wanted to add around that? Any other questions?
No, there are other questions.
Okay, go for it.
I was just actually... Spirit Dancing is asking, she says, greetings from the UK. This evening has been announced that England goes into a lockdown from Thursday. Any insights from Franco?
Yeah, lock yourself up. Oh my God. It doesn't matter what they present. Being locked up is more of how you interpret the experience. You can interpret the experience as my freedom is taken away. You could interpret it that this is unfair. You could interpret it that in some way I can't even be myself or anything of that nature. Or you can see it, oh, okay, this is what's presenting. You're going to use that lockdown experience to see what story, what program, what belief systems, what sequence of stuff that comes up for you, so that you can actually spend quality time to clear yourself out, to purge every part of it so you become more clear. Now, in that clarity, you're now going to be able to see that this is a dance, and then you're going to look at some creative ability to be able to experience more freedom within the confines, but the thing is you can actually stretch the confines. When you have no fear, you kind of become invisible when you're not holding that energy, so that you will be able to interact a little bit more that. Now, the restrictions are there to push people at this point in time. It's to push people not only to work on themselves for anything that hasn't been cleared, but also for people to become empowered to say, hey, do I comply, do I support this or not? You want to get into non-judgmental, and you don't want to look at the government or whoever is mandating that as they're the evil ones. You want to see them as, oh, that's what they're presenting me as, the opportunity. And then they're also presenting me a factor that they're more powerful than I am, or that they have more authority than I am. You want to get to the state where they don't have authority for you, because you're making that choice within yourself and say, yeah, they can present whatever. It's up to me if I choose to participate or not. And at this point, it's not about being the rebel, but you can also come together and make the point that, hey, we're not complying, we're not supporting, and so forth. And it's not a riot, it's more of, what did you call it when people get together that you guys did? A demonstration? No.
Oh, a rally.
A rally. You can choose to do that from a collective space. But first and foremost, you want to get to the point where you want to look at anything that comes up for you. Because the thing is, a lot of times when something like that is offered, you will find some emotional charges. You're going to find some stories, programs, belief systems that have come up. Use that opportunity. And then use the opportunity when some of that stuff is clear to connect with yourself. And as you're connecting with yourself, you're able to see grander potentiality and then start using your imagination to see that changing. So what you're doing is you're transmitting throughout that whole environment of the UK and then throughout the world, that you are creating a world of freedom. You're creating a world not opposite to what you have, but a freedom where you have free choice, where you can create your reality, where you're not bound to anything, or that you're not enslaved by anything or anything of that nature. You start to see what the world that actually is coming from within, that wants to be presented out in the playground, what we call your worldscape, your immediate reality, which can be the UK and then beyond. So use this as a tool to really purge and clear every part of anything that comes up. See yourself in that empowered state. Of course, spend some time in meditation and so forth. Do not feed the fear. If the fear comes up, give yourself the opportunity to sit with it, feel it until it dissolves. And if you need to accentuate it in the sense where you're going to make more stories on top of it to make it as big as possible, because sometimes if you can expand, not sometimes, but this is how it works, if you can really expand and intensify the anger and make it as ridiculous as possible, the anger or the fear, let's call it the fear. Sorry, I didn't want to get into anger. But the fear, if you expand it to such a degree that it actually goes into ridiculousness, and then you can start laughing at it because you'll feel like laughing about it. And then what you're doing is you're dissolving that pattern and any restrictions that you may have felt, because sometimes the restriction may remind you when you didn't have the freedom being at home with your parents, or being in school, or being somewhere, or a multitude of different places. So you want to clear all of that part. So use that as a powerful tool. Okay? What else? Was there any other questions? Okay, good. We did really good then. All right, so everybody knows how not to limit ourselves. So I did scribble all over the place, didn't I?
You are a scribbler.
So now we all know, actually maybe a different color. Let's see, let's use yellow. How not to reduce access to our clarity and expanded perspective, but actually to reverse the whole process. So that in fact, what we do, we actually allow more clarity to come through us in a very powerful way, and to be able to utilize it and expanded perspective. So what does an expanded perspective mean? Seeing the bigger picture, seeing everything that is available without filtering and only getting a small little piece of it. Because a lot of times what happens when we are looking at a situation, scenario, even fear, or lockdown, or anything of that nature, you only see a small part of it. Oh, they're infringing, they're limiting me, they're whatever is associated with that from. But when you're looking at it from an expanded perspective, you see the opportunity of the whole thing, and you see the perfection in it. Oh, great, I get to spend some quality time with possibly family, but the really important is I get to play with all the stuff that I clear within myself, and I connect with myself, I become more empowered, and so forth. You'll see all of that will change very, very rapidly. Now, if you were in episode 48, I did talk about some of the really intense stuff that's going to be coming about, and that's part of it. That's kind of an offering, and in certain areas is going to be more intensified than others. Is there a real threat? No. There never has been and never will be. Is there other versions of it coming out? It's always dwarfed. It's always less than what we've normally experienced every year. However, the staging at this point in time is to really accentuate the fear, but the fear is really about us breaking out of it and also to become empowered. You were going to say something?
Joanne just sent in a question. What is happening in April 2021? I didn't get an understanding of that month, I guess, from the previous.
Oh, right.
Uh,
Yes, we're entering another stage at that point, and things will start moving much more quickly, but with more ease. And in fact, we have the opportunity to go with ease by just being in the state of an observer, neutrality, and so forth. But in April, the intent is that we have another wave coming in, and that wave will actually smoothen out, and actually a lot of the craziness that's happening will start to kind of already alter in a very powerful way. There's also another stimulation of consciousness and awareness that is oneness based, in the sense where we start to see that, hey, we're doing this together. I know I didn't talk about it then. At this point in time, I'm not here to elaborate it at the moment because it's in the works. But let's say after we've gone through the 4 to 5 months of intensities, and of course in December 21st, the removing of the super low frequency and super stimulated fearness and so forth that would be used, and including a lot of the programmer and the supporters of the what we call the Luciferian and other related operating codes being completely shut off at that point in time on the 21st and beyond. And then, of course, the waves of intensities will be January, February, and most likely most of March, if not all of March. And then April, it's a pretty powerful energetic wave. Sometimes people have called it like a potential flash, but what it is it's a blast of fuller spectrum that will not only activate a lot of the more dormant stuff, it will activate the codes that we have come into our system that have been dormant, or we have chosen to hold back from it to keep it dormant because we were not feeling ready. But at that point, it stimulates it so that it goes from a dormant state to an active state. It also, in around that point in time, it actually activates a lot more of the crystals that we have within ourselves. Because we are all carbon, silicate, and crystal. The ratio changes based on how you're moving forward. But the crystal actually, because it stores a lot more information and so forth, will be stimulated so that we can actually utilize more of that. So that's what we're looking into April and into the end of the year. The exposure, or what we call disclosure, that will come about will not be so impactful where we're going to go into fear, reaction, or hatred, because this is the thing. One of the things that has occurred with a lot of the disclosure that's been happening for quite some time, a lot of people go into judgment mode, go into polarized mode, and even the ones that are so-called awakening, so they're actually seeing what's happening behind the scenes, and then they go into ego again, which ego just takes another version of it, where they're judging them, and they're saying that they're the evil ones and they have to suffer, they have to die, they have to go to jail, they have to do all of that stuff, and put a lot of energy in that regards. And that is just accentuating the polarity, righteousness, and so forth, and it's still in the depth of the ego, and it's still got a hold of you. Because when you see it from an expanded perspective, you see it for what it is. It's a dance, it's role players, and they play the polarity role as much as we've engaged in different levels of polarity at different stages in our lives. And now we're looking at those polarities and say, are we done with the polarities? Is it obsolete? Is it still useful in any way? And then we can transform it, because transmute it and transform it. It's not about finding the evil ones and locking them up. Yes, they may have played a role that may look that way, absolutely, but it is a role. So this is the trap that we get caught up in. And I say that loosely because it's a freedom choice that we make. is getting lost in the idea of righteousness, judgment, hatred, comparison, and so forth, which is very deep in our ego operating system that actually distracts and keeps us bound up. Did you want to say something else? Nope. So that's kind of what's rolling out in that regard. So are we all good with the questions and so forth?
Yep.
Absolutely. Everybody just got it all figured out?
We're going to wrap her up.
Okay. So we're no longer reducing our access to clarity. We're expanding it, and we're achieving further expanded perspectiveness that we plug into our life. So thank you again for participating and bringing and co-creating this experience. Use everything here that is offered. Listen to it several times. Activate your own knowing within it. Use your empowered state from it and so forth. Not that this is the answer, but this stimulates what you already have within yourself, your inner knowing, your inner clarity, your inner navigational system, your inner expanded version of yourself. To have more of this, if you're on YouTube, please subscribe and click the notification bell so that you will know all the different episodes that come up. The next episode will be on Tuesday next week. That will be coming through. That's the first part. If you're on Facebook and you'd like to go watch it on Facebook, you can join the Facebook group called Advancing Consciousness Series. We already have some 70 odd videos there, and YouTube and Vimeo. And of course, we also make it available on other platforms. But we have something brand new that just started off on Wednesday, which is the podcast. And that comes out daily. It's a little shorter. It's more information. We take bits and pieces of different information, expand it and so forth. We take other people's questions and we kind of expand it also. And we're not using the board. We're not going into a lecture version, which is a little different than the series. But we will cover different. We already have four episodes. The next episode is coming out tomorrow. We try to release them all in the morning so that they're available for you. I know it's morning based on Eastern time, or what we call West in our part of the world, but it will vary at different times for you. How can you access it? We have a YouTube channel called Advancing Consciousness Podcast, which is a video version of it. We also have it on Vimeo under the same name, Advancing Consciousness Podcast. We have a Facebook group called Advancing Consciousness Podcast, which you can join, but it's also on both of my other two pages, which is my personal page and my public page. And also we post it on Kimberly's page normally. And sometimes I share it on different pages also, or groups, I should say, not pages. But so that's all available for you. Subscribe there too. If you're on YouTube, subscribe it. Follow if you're on Vimeo. Join the group, and then, at the same time, just follow the group also so that you will get the notification. They'll be coming out daily. It's kind of nudging you to assist you to kind of keep you going in motion, different topics, different updates, and sometimes we'll have interviews with certain people. So that's all available for you. We appreciate any and all contributions that have been sent, and I have great appreciation and it's very helpful for us at this point in time. As you know, we're holding quite a few platforms. We're investing a lot of energy and time, so we'd like to stay on that momentum. So any financial support helps us to keep the platforms going. It helps us to support so we can focus on creating more content. And very last thing here at this point, we have links in the description, and I'm sure Kimberly has probably put some things there for contribution, for looking out for any how to get on some of the platforms for the podcast. And then we also have the link for you to check out some of the workshops that we have, and also to join Let's Talk About You, which is a monthly group that we meet twice a month. And have discussions with whoever chooses to attend at that point in time. And the very last thing is that we have the 5th of December, we have a new workshop that's going to be coming out. Once all the details and the platform is set up, we will send notifications for that. Till then, go out and have a blast, and hopefully to see you enjoying the podcast and the next episode that comes up next Tuesday. Thank you for now.